Ready to dive into some seriously ancient stories. We're talking Mesopotamian myths, the cradle of civilization stuff.
Myths that still echo in our stories today.
Exactly. And our guidebook for this little journey is Stephanie Dalley's Myths from Mesopotamia.
A fantastic resource.
So you want the quick version, the need to know on these ancient tales.
The key players, the big themes, what makes them tick.
Let's do it. It's kind of mind-blowing how these myths, thousands of years old, still resonate,
Oh, absolutely.
These big questions like where did we come from? How did the world begin? They were asking those questions back then, too.
And they weren't afraid to get a little dramatic about it.
That's an understatement.
Atra-Hasis, for example.
Yeah.
The creation myth. We've got Mami, this awesome mother goddess,
Mother goddess, okay.
teams up with Ea, the god of wisdom. They get down to the business of creating humans. But get this. It's not just some simple clay-to-human situation.
Oh, no.
They use clay, sure, but mixed with the blood of a slain god. 𝀜��្ឍ, to be precise.
Wow. Talk about starting life with a bang.
Right.
Okay, but why use a god's blood? What's the significance there?
It's not just a shocking detail, right? It's symbolic. It's telling us that humans are this potent mix of the earthly, that's the clay, and the divine, the god's blood.
So we're born from this kind of volatile cocktail of the ordinary and the extraordinary. I like it.
And that idea that humans have this special purpose, it pops up again in the epic of creation. Different story, similar thing. This time it's Marduk, the top god, using the blood of another slain god Kingu to mold humanity.
Okay, so we've got a slain god theme going on here. But again, the purpose.
Humans are created to lighten the load, to take care of the burdens of existence. Make the gods' lives a bit easier.
Huh. So basically the gods were like, this universe is fantastic and all, but keeping it running is exhausting. We need some interns.
Exactly. Someone's got to handle the day-to-day operations, right?
Seeking dedicated mortals to maintain universal order. Benefits, package negotiable. It's got to be out there somewhere, right?
You think they go through a rigorous interview process for that?
Oh, I'd imagine. So we've got creation all figured out, but as with most things, things don't always run smoothly.
That's an understatement.
And in Mesopotamian mythology, nothing says time for a reset, like a massive flood.
Classic flood myth. Dalley points out that this version, the Mesopotamian one, is probably the oldest one out there.
Older than the ancient Greeks. Wow.
Quite possibly. And much like those Greek myths, the flood is this kind of divine solution to overpopulation. Too many humans, too much noise. You know how it goes.
Sounds familiar.
Right, this tension between humanity and the natural order. Like we pushed a little too far.
That's a little too far, yeah.
But the flood myth, it goes deeper than that, doesn't it? It introduces this huge reset button, this before and after in human existence. In Gilgamesh, Dalley talks about how the flood signals the end of an era where humans could, potentially, achieve immortality.
So, pre-flood, a shot at immortality. Post-flood, welcome to being mortal. Your time is ticking.
It adds this whole other layer to the human condition. And here's where it gets even more interesting. These flood myths, they're everywhere, across so many cultures.
No way.
Oh, yeah. It's like this shared experience that resonated really deeply with our ancestors. And get this, Dalley even brings up real-world evidence. Actual flood deposits found in Iraq. Seems to back up these ancient tales.
So it wasn't just a story, it was woven into their history, their landscape, everything.
Exactly. The flood, memory or myth, it shaped how they understood the world, the gods, their own mortality. That's the power of these stories, right? They weren't just campfire tales, they were reflections on the universe, our place in it.
It's wild to think that something as real as a flood could be woven into these myths.
Right. It shows how these stories were connected to their reality, their fears.
And speaking of fears, who hasn't had a moment of, wait, this life is temporary?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dalley brings up how the Epic of Gilgamesh tackles that very thing head on.
And the whole mortality issue gets even more intense after the flood, doesn't it?
Almost like a direct result, right? Before the flood, immortality is on the table. After, not so much.
And who better to test the limits of mortality than Gilgamesh himself? 2/3 divine, 1/3 human. Talk about a genetic lottery win.
But even with those odds, he's still driven by that human fear of death, especially after the flood, as Dalley points out.
Makes you wonder, what does it say about us that even a demigod is afraid to die?
It kind of underscores the whole mortality is the great equalizer thing.
Spoiler alert, Gilgamesh does not discover the Fountain of Youth, right?
Sadly, no.
Yeah.
But that's where the real heart of the story lies, I think. It's not about escaping death. It's about confronting that fear, learning to live with it.
It's like maybe the search for meaning, the quest itself, is more important than actually finding immortality.
Maybe that's the point. But we can't forget, these dramas only work because of the gods themselves.
Oh, for sure. And when it comes to dramatic, Ishtar takes the cake.
Goddess of love, war, fertility. She was not messing around.
And she was definitely not afraid to use all those powers either.
Dalley points out her descent into the underworld, which is fascinating on a few levels. It
Yeah.
shows us her complexity, but also what happens when power goes unchecked. And pride, of course.
So what happens? Does she just waltz into the underworld?
Not quite. Imagine this. She's descending, right? Each gate she passes through, she's stripped of something.
Like literally stripped.
Clothing, jewels, her crown, all those symbols of her power, her status, they're gone. Every gate, another layer peeled away.
It's like the universe is giving her a timeout.
Exactly. Even the gods weren't above the rules. Which is interesting because it makes me think of the Greek myth, Persephone and Hades.
Interesting. How so?
Both stories have powerful women, journeys to the underworld, this link between those journeys and nature itself. Like they were using myths to understand life, death, the balance of everything.
It's amazing how these common threads pop up in different cultures.
Absolutely. But the Mesopotamian myths, they're not all creation stories and power struggles. Dalley also talks about rebellion, those who challenge the order of things.
Like a cosmic mutiny. Who do we meet in those stories?
Well, there's one character, Anzu. Picture a monstrous bird god, but not just any bird god, one with a taste for chaos.
Sounds like trouble.
And his target, the Tablet of Destinies, kept under lock and key by the god Ellil.
Wait, the Tablet of Destinies? Like the big one.
The one and only. Imagine a scroll that dictates the fate of everything. Empires rise and fall, someone wins the lottery, a god stubs their toe. It's all in there. And Anzu just takes it.
Bold move. What was he thinking?
Who knows? But that's the point, isn't it? He disrupts everything. It's a full-blown cosmic crisis.
So the other gods, they're just cool with this.
Definitely not. It's a 5-alarm universal emergency. And that's where Ninurta steps in, a warrior god ready to throw down.
One-on-one, god-on-bird god action.
The fate of literally everything hanging in the balance.
I can only imagine the scene Dalley paints. This has got to be a good one.
Epic doesn't even cover it. But there's this other detail Dalley brings up. It's actually Ninurta's mother, Ellil, who does something fascinating.
What's that?
She's worried about her son, obviously. So she goes to Ea, another god, begs for help. And get this. Because she steps up, she's given a new title, Mistress of All Gods.
You're kidding. Talk about mom power.
It's a small detail, but so significant. Shows that power and influence, especially for women, it came in many forms.
It makes you think, if the fate of the universe were on the line, who would you call? My bet's on mom. It's amazing how these myths can go from these epic battles to quieter moments between a mother and son.
Right. It reminds us that these stories, they weren't just about gods and monsters. They were about very human experiences.
Absolutely. Even gods had moms who worried about them. But speaking of things to worry about, Dalley talks about this myth era in Ishum. That has a different vibe.
It does, doesn't it? It feels more grounded, like it's reflecting a world that's a little closer to our own.
More realistic.
In a way. Dalley suggests it might even be based on actual historical events. Think Babylonia, maybe 9th or 8th century BC, a time of turmoil, uncertainty.
Okay, so less about creation, more about how do we deal with a world that feels like it's falling apart.
Exactly. And the myth tackles that head on.
Yeah.
Enter Era, the god of plague and war. Not just powerful, but restless.
Uh-oh.
He's itching to unleash chaos. Imagine a force of nature, pure destruction, but bored.
That's not a good combination. So who tries to talk him off the proverbial ledge?
That would be Ishum. Think of him as Era's voice of reason, the one always saying, hey, maybe don't destroy everything.
So the classic battle, reason versus chaos. Who wins?
This is where it gets interesting. Dalley points out the ending is unusual. The scribe claims the story came to him in a dream, and it ends with Era telling everyone to basically sing his praises.
Wait, really? After all that talk of destruction?
Right. It's unsettling. Like, chaos might be inevitable. The god of war, he's going to do his thing, and we're supposed to just be cool with it.
A little unsettling for sure. So what's the takeaway? After all these myths, these wild stories...
I think it goes back to what we were saying. These aren't just stories. They're reflections of how an entire civilization wrestled with the big stuff. Life, death, fate, you name it.
It's like we're getting a glimpse into their minds, their fears, their hopes, all through these myths.
And the amazing thing is, those same questions, those same anxieties, They're still relevant today. That's why these stories still resonate.
So as you delve deeper into Mesopotamian mythology, think about those big questions. Fate, free will, the role of power. See how those ancient anxieties might still be playing out in our world today.